Welcome to the Elk Talk Podcast with Randy Newberg and Corey Jacobson. Presented by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation.
The goal is, what little you and I know about elk hunting, we share with people.
I've got an elk building. It's like 120 yards away. What do I do? First off, the thought would never cross my mind when an elk's being 120 yards away to call anybody on a cell phone.
All elk?
All the time? Only elk?
Only elk.
Well, it's us having conversations, so we usually go down some rabbit holes, but
If you hunt with Corey Jacobson, you will find the landscape is full of rabbit holes. We're just going to make this up as we go.
and you look at it like, oh, that's a target-rich environment. But if you're trying to single one out, a solo target there is much easier to go into than a big group.
We record everything, so there's no BSing, no lying, no faking it with us.
Did we hit the record
I
button?
thought I forgot to hit the record button. If you want to know something about elk hunting, this probably isn't the podcast to listen to. Should we give them a list of all the other podcasts where they might learn something? Good morning, Corey Jacobson. How are you?
Well, just judging by how you sound here in the intro, I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I don't know. My head is so full of sinus infection, I can hardly hear you.
Man.
My eyes are bugged out like a fish that got reeled up from about 600 feet down. And I'm trying my best to hang in here. If I say something really stupid, like worse than I did on the last episode, my apologies in advance. But
Well, based on all the comments we got from the last episode, people are okay with your
yeah.
off-the-wall comments. And
Yeah, I wondered about that. You know, when you tell people to just pack up and leave, we need some volunteers. You never know how that's going to go over. But so far, all the comments we got in emails, people were on board with that.
I was going to say, I think we must have already ran those 4 haters off, and we're down to our 7 original followers. So.
You think we got 7?
Well, I don't know. I was being
Let's not
generous.
get carried away here.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Well, you're obviously tougher than I am, because when I wasn't feeling good a couple of weeks ago, I just told you, hey, I'm gonna punt here. We got to take a few days and let me recover. You're a gamer here. You're willing to do it.
By the time we're all done, the audience might say, Newberg, you should have just punted. You should have taken the time off. But no, I got a lot on my plate right now. You know, I just got done with 6 trade shows in 9 weeks. And the last day of the last trade show, I got the Shanghai chicken flu or something.
Yeah.
But now I got to go do some beaver trapping. And so that's what I'm doing this weekend. I got to get some tax returns done. And then I spent 2 hours this morning on the phone with the IRS.
Ooh.
You want to ruin a Friday? Just
Man.
be on hold for about an hour and a half and get redirected to the wrong department every time. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry. Let me connect you to the right department. I'm like, well, how long will that be? And instantly the computer says, you are... You know,
caller number 74.
Today. Yeah. Yeah.
Your approximate wait time is eternity.
35 minutes. Yeah. So, oh, wow.
Well, so you called them. They didn't call you.
Yeah. So here's the deal. All of a sudden, all the CPAs in the world end up with a big flurry of tax notices in the last month. You want to know why? Because the IRS said that during COVID, we put these on hold for a couple years, but we're now going back to following up on them.
Nice.
So all these clients are like, oh my gosh, they're coming to steal my house or something. It's like, wait a second. So when I finally get a human there, I'm like, well, do you have the correspondence from 2021? Well, no, we don't have that. I'm like, well, you do, because it was sent via certified letter. And I got the stub here that says someone signed for it. Oh, well, it's not in this file. All right.
So
yeah.
Today, when we're recording this, is the 15th of March, which is the deadline for
partnerships, S corporation, C corporation. So they're all getting extended today, I'm sure. But Yeah, so that's just, if you want a case of the red ass, just call the IRS for a while and you'll be ready to light somebody up. But I'm usually pretty professional when I'm on the call. But by the time I got to the third department, I was like, ma'am, before you transfer me, can you promise me this person's going to be able to answer my question? And then they try to tell you to go online to irs.gov.
Oh, yeah.
And you do that, and it says, if none of this resolves your issue, please call this phone number.
Yeah.
So you're like in this circular
caught
thing.
in the
You get
loop.
on, you call the phone number, it says go to the website. You go to the website, it says call the phone number.
Oh,
That's
no,
how it goes.
fortunately,
And they closed the office here in Bozeman. I used to just go down there in person, and it's kind of funny going to.
They probably closed all the in-person offices because too many people went there in person, and they couldn't get them in that loop.
Probably. So I don't know. Boy, I'm really glad I'm out of that business. All I got to do is have to solve about one issue every 2 or 3 months with the IRS on behalf of old clients, or be on my own behalf, or whatever it might be. And it's like, boy, I don't know how I did that for 30 some years and didn't end up in jail.
Yeah.
I mean, but we always had a motto. I was taught this. I worked for a large national firm, and the motto was, or the mantra that they taught every young CPA is, if someone's going to jail, make sure it's the client.
That's right.
So
yeah, I've definitely gotten some advice from a CPA in the past. Is like, you sure we can do that? And he's like, I'm pretty sure.
Pretty sure.
And it's like, whoa, let's not do that one. That's that seems like one where you're making sure that I'm the one that's on the wrong side of the fence here.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah.
When I got back from this trade show, and my head has been so puffed up this week. they're filming me over at Mountain Tough, and I'm over there working out and snot running down my nose, and I had to wear a long sleeve shirt so I could wipe all the snot running out of my nose. And they're like, "Are you sure you can film this week?" I'm like, "Well, I don't know if it's going to get better or get worse, so let's get on with it here. I got enough impairments that everyone's going to give me a free pass anyhow." So, and then I came over here and shot some videos. And I'm sure when those videos go out in the next couple of weeks, people are going to think that I don't know, they're going to think I was drunk or something. But, oh well.
What were the videos?
Oh, they're kind of fun, actually. Well, one's really kind of fun. The crew is like, Randy, we get so many people asking what the mistakes are that we make. You got to do your top 5 elk hunting mistakes.
Oh, boy.
So I did that one. And then we get a lot of questions about when people draw a state elk tag where there's a lot of general units like Montana or Wyoming or Colorado, maybe even your region units in Idaho. A lot of people are like, how do I pick which one of these general units I should go hunt?
Yeah.
Well,
we get a lot of emails with people asking that. Hey, I got a Montana general license this year, or I'm going to Colorado over the counter. What unit should I go to?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's funny. I go through and make it sound really scientific. And then at the end, I said, in spite of these 5 criteria that I told you I focus on, here's what it really comes down to. Which of those units that get sorted through my criteria actually fit my hunting style?
Yeah.
Because I might be crazy in thinking it this way, but at least my journals and my track record say that if it's a unit that is laid out for my hunting style, like a lot of spot and stock and glassing and getting away from roads and trails and hunting sanctuaries, I'm probably going to have above average reported success rate, or reported average success rate. If it's thick timber and it's nasty, ugly stuff where you got to slow hunt or you got to, sit and wait, I would bring that success rate average way down. So
So you don't spend a lot of time in Northwest Montana, is what you're saying?
I have never hunted elk in Region 1 or Region 2 of Montana. Because
and see, and
like
for me,
Idaho.
And those are the kind of places that I prefer to hunt, just with my
Yeah.
style of hunting, using the bugle more to locate, we can, you get in some of those big pockets that are heavy timber, and it seems like it's a little easier to call elk in when there's thick timber than out in the open. In the open, they want to stand back and be able to see. And so, yeah, it really comes at the end of the day, at least you've got to filter in your hunting style into that criteria and keep that in mind.
Yeah. So when people see the video, they're going to be like, Randy, that's pretty scientific until you get to the end. Then you throw all the scientific stuff out the window.
Well, maybe you should have just made that filter at the beginning and said, hey, make sure before you even start, you select only the units that are going to fit your hunting style and then apply the scientific data.
Yeah. Well, I did it in typical
Backwards.
accountant. I did it back asswards. So I said, here's my approach. First, I filter as many units as I can that meet these criteria that I'm looking for. And then second, I pour over maps to see which of those units have the topography, geography, and access that appeals to me and my hunting style. So,
That's good.
but most of the stuff, most of the criteria that I sort by is already out there on Go Hunt's filtering 2.0.
So easy.
First
It really
thing
just
I know
makes it too easy.
It does. It's almost like too much information, right?
Yeah.
My number one thing is I look at success rates over the last 5 years. Then I look at the percentage of public land, and then I go into some detail about, just because it says 60% public land, if it's surrounded mostly by private, well, you got to think about that.
Yeah.
Then I look at the bull to cow ratio over the last 5 years, and I hope that I have a unit that has more than 20 bulls per 100 cows. If I find 30, that unit is definitely going to be on my list.
Yeah.
But there's some general units that have 10 or less, and you get those out of your way right away. And then number 4, I look at the percentage of bulls that have 6 points per side on at least one antler. Not that tells you everything, but it gives me a general idea of, is there a diverse age class in that unit?
Yeah.
And I hope I can find where 30% have 6 point or better. But in a lot of general units, you're going to be looking at 10% to 20%. If it's more
and
than
that's
50,
just basically the accounting of if there were 100 bulls killed in that unit, what percentage of them were 6 points. So,
right.
and you have to keep in mind that it's going to probably be easier in most units to kill a smaller bull than a 6 point. So it isn't a reflection necessarily of, what percentage of the bulls are mature bulls in that unit, but it does give you a good idea of, hey, I mean, you look at some units like in Arizona and places where they manage for trophy quality, the percentage of 6 point bulls that are killed are sometimes 75, 80%.
Right.
And then you get into a unit in Colorado or a unit in Oregon. And, there's some units that you don't break 10 or 15% of the bulls that get killed are 6 points. So it just kind of gives you an idea of the demographics there and the maybe the majority of the bulls that you're going to actually have encounters with and be hunting. And if a mature bull and a 6 point is your target, then that becomes a pretty important criteria to look at.
Yeah. So that's number 4. And then the last one usually is a little bit harder, and I don't put a lot of weight in it, but it's good to know, and that is the calves per 100 cows.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just to give me an indication of whether the herd is stable, growing, declining. And, I like to have 30 calves per 100 cows because most studies will tell you 25 to 30 calves. Recruitment into the adult population is what's necessary to sustain the herd.
Yep.
If it's less than that, I know we've got some issues with habitat, predation, maybe too much hunting pressure. Or if it's more than that, it's like, all right, we must have some good habitat here. So the downside of that last one is a lot of times it's not very well published. So you almost end up having to call a biologist or do a lot of research to find where that data is. So it's not that big of a criteria for me. So by the time I sort those 5 items, I usually end up with, I don't know, I'd say 3 to 6 units that sort of meet what I'm looking for. And that's when I go throw kind of all the scientific stuff out the window and just say, what looks like the kind of place I'd want to go hunt? And so I pick one of those 5 or 3, 4, 5, whatever, and say that unit right there, and that's where I go. So
Yep. So I do something very similar. I go out to go hunt and I get all of that information. So, for instance, for the state of Idaho, you'd mentioned, Idaho's broken up into different zones, and within some zones, there are anywhere from 2 to 4 units that you can choose from if you have a
Yep.
tag for that zone. It used to be just, you get a tag and you could hunt anywhere in Idaho, and then they narrowed it down to help manage a little better into zones. But it still wasn't limited until just a few years ago, where now non-residents are limited in how many tags are available in each zone, not just how
Yeah.
many tags are available overall. So now you have to be a little bit more intentional ahead of time doing the research, because you don't know if that tag is going to be available. And if the tag where you hunted last year is not available when you get in there, you've got to have backup plans. And so
Yep.
I go through and I write down, I put everything in a spreadsheet, which that's the engineer accountant method of tracking things. And so I go hunt and I get same thing. I mean, trophy potential, the bull to cow ratio, the 6-point percentage, the success rate, all of those things. I also put down how many tags are available total, as well as how many non-resident tags are available, because that'll give you, if you're looking at, one unit that has 20 tags and has 75% success rate, you might be looking at that going, ooh, 75% success, that's really good. And then you realize, well, my chances of getting that tag are really slim. Or
Yeah.
you get to a unit that's got 700 people that you're sharing the unit with. You don't want to go there if you're trying to get away from people. And then I actually go as far as I'll get in and measure approximate land area, how many acres the
Oh,
unit
wow.
is, and then I'll get a ratio of square miles per hunter or hunter per square mile to show kind of, is it getting a lot of pressure, or the trailhead? It just gives you an idea of, hey, if you've got a unit that is maybe say 200,000 acres and there's however many hunters. But if you're looking at 1,500 acres per hunter versus 4,000 acres per hunter, it just gives you an idea of, hey, am I going to be able to get away from people? So I do that, but then I go through and I actually weight each of those criteria. So say, like, for the bull to cow ratio, there, if bull to cow ratio, like you said, anything over 30 is good. So anything under 30, I will put as, I'll give it a weight of 1. And then anything from 30 to 40, I'll give a weight of 2. And then anything over 40, I'll give a weight of 3. And then percentage of 6-point bulls, same thing. If it's under, say, 30, I'll give it a 1. If it's 30 to 50, I'll give it a 2. And if it's over 50, I'll give it a 3. And then I assign a score for each of those units based on that weighting. And then I look at everything and say, okay, this one got the highest score. So it's got good bull to cow ratio. It's got good percentage of 6-point. It's got high success rate. And I do all that. And it really, I live in Idaho, and I thought I knew all the units and thought, okay, this is the best over the counter. This is where I'm going to buy my tag. And it was eye-opening to see how poor some of the units that I've hunted in the past actually ranked on that list. We're talking out of, I don't remember how many units there were, 60 some, 70 some, or whatever. Some of the units that I was hunting actually ranked like number 40, number 31. And I'm like, why am I can choose as a resident to hunt any unit in the state I want to, but it comes back to, I'm comfortable. I know the unit. I know where I can find elk in that unit. And so am I better off hunting a unit that ranks number 40 that I know? Or am I better going blindly into a unit that ranks maybe number 6 or number 7? And it's been, we've struggled in some of the units we've went to that ranked really good just because we didn't know it. And we would get in there and there's outfitter camps all over in there, or just different things. So there's always a learning curve. You can use statistics so much, but I think it's a good starting point, but I certainly wouldn't put I've learned not to put all my eggs in one basket and
Yeah.
that basket being statistics.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. You know what's going to happen? Either us or Go Hunt are going to get a blast of emails saying, I want to see Corey's template that he's using here.
Nope.
Okay.
That's too much. I mean,
Proprietary?
well, all the info is available for anybody. Like I said, I go to
Yeah.
Go Hunt and I gather all the info, but then to help me, you can go into their filtering 2.0 and it's going to
Oh,
get
yeah.
you really close to what
Yep.
I'm getting. You set the bull to cow ratio at whatever percentage you want. I only want 50% or higher. You set the success rate. I only want 40% or higher. And pretty soon there's only 2 or 3 units that pop up on the map that are highlighted, and that basically gives you the same thing. I think what I liked was being able to go in and get the density of hunter population in there, as far as here's how many square miles the unit is, here's how many tags were available. And so it gave me a good idea of this is some pretty remote area because there's only, there's 4,000 acres per hunter in here, whereas the average in Idaho is 1,100 acres per hunter for the units. So this one's going to be 4 times, but then you start looking at it and there's reasons. There's always reasons why
Oh, yeah.
there's not as many people in there. It's either because success rate is lower or the trophy potential is lower. There's always a reason. And so you just have to weigh those reasons.
Yeah. No, that's that all that stuff is. I think we all have our own personal way of doing it, and kind of sorting, as you say. I've got some crazy spreadsheets out there that I update every year, and it's like, do I really need to do this? Probably not. I mean, I I guess I'm just in the bad habit of what I do with my spare time, but. Anyhow, if people don't have it, the base of what we just talked about there, the time saver is Go Hunt's insider system. And if you're interested, folks, promo code Elk Talk, going to put $50 of store credit in your gear shop if you use that when you sign up. But we all take it and then we tweak it even beyond that. But it sure saves a lot of time for me.
Yeah.
My number of spreadsheets went from about 50 to about 3.
Yeah.
So,
and that's the other thing to keep in mind. If you're using filtering 2.0, it's going to highlight on the map how many of those units meet your criteria. And then, it narrows it from, say, 70 units in Idaho to 4 units that now match all of your criteria. And then you can go in and click on it, and they're going to give you all the details. They're going to tell you how many, how big the unit is, how many square acres are in the unit. They're going to tell you, is it hard to access the public land?
Yep.
There's a lot of detail there. So a spreadsheet is great, but having that detail narrowed down and then being able to go in and make an educated decision is super powerful.
Yeah. One of the things where I've got my hopes up too often is when I see really high success rates.
Yeah.
And then I notice that it's 60% private land.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? Most of that public land is probably so there's a disparity between the 6. If you could get this from the state agency, and it's hard to do, but if it's mostly private land, that will skew the success rates higher. And you're probably going to have a lower success rate on public land than you are private land. So when you see some of these units that have really high success rates, make sure you examine that. Because, I know of a unit in Montana that, there's some public land there, but most of the elk get killed on private land. So people see, oh my gosh, look at that. There's a 65% success rate. Most units in Montana, it's only, 15 or 20%. I got to go hunt there.
And there's still 35% public land. There's plenty of area for me to go hunt. I'm going to tap into this high success.
Yeah. And then they go there and they find out that 3,000 other guys had the same idea. So the hunter per acre is, it doesn't get measured in acres per hunter. It almost gets measured in hunters per acre.
Yeah,
because everyone had the same idea.
The success rate on the public side brings the 90% success on the public land down, or on the private land down to 60% overall.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just throw that out there as a caution to people, because if you don't really, so once you sort those 4 or 5 or however many units shake out in that, you still got a lot of homework to do.
Yeah.
You know, instead of doing homework on 70 units and you're only doing homework on 4, that's way more efficient. But there's been a couple times where I almost pulled the trigger on a tag, and I'm like, well, I better go look at that. Why is that success rate so high?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't have access to that private land. I don't know what I'm thinking. Cross that one off. So that just is something people should be thinking about. But
Yeah.
yeah, I can't remember what my 5 failures were.
I was going
My
to say, how
5
did you only
biggest
pick 5?
mistakes.
I make 5
Well,
a day or 5 a morning.
yeah. Well, I told the crew I have a list of 55 at least things that I've screwed up, and they said no, you can only pick 5. And I recorded that. I think the top one was I was too interested in buying gadgets and doodads and got lazy and thought there was a shortcut. Number 2, I didn't become a student of elk until I finally had enough years of unsuccessful stuff that I started consuming every book, every resource, every scientific piece of elk that I could. That so the mistake was not doing that is what the mistake was.
Yeah.
The correction of the mistake was to go and start becoming a student of elk. Then the other one, I think, was number 3 was I hunted them too much like whitetails because I grew up whitetail hunting. And I thought that, you sneak around the woods and you cover a half mile a day and, you'll see one eventually. I was applying tactics that might work on grandpa's 60-acre food plot or forest out there behind the farm, but it doesn't work really good when there's 60,000 acres for that elk to be walking around. My other mistake was that sometimes I still, and this is where whitetail hunters can excel, is I always thought that somehow, some way I could cheat the wind. I'm not sure why I thought that. And even today, sometimes I get lazy and I'm not paying good attention and the wind swirls or does something. And if I would have been paying attention, I would have known that was going to happen. So that was number 4. Trying to remember what number 5 was. Oh, I know what number 5 was. I didn't know how to take care of an elk far from a road or a trailhead. So I was worried about it spoiling. So I would always hunt, well, how far can I drag this thing? Or could me and a buddy drag this thing? Well, I ended up hunting near roads and trails, and that's why I wasn't seeing anything.
Yeah.
And Terry Swart, who used to own Budget Game Processing here in Bozeman, he let me go out to his shop one day while he broke down a whole elk. He laid it down on some tarps and said, "Here's what I'd do if this thing was out in the woods." And he walked me through how to do the gutless method. And, I mean, it had already been gutted, but and man, that skill of being able and knowing how to get an elk out and not having to fret about it spoiling because I don't know how to quarter it and do the gutless method. That might have been actually, maybe that should have been number 1. I don't know. Once I learned that and got comfortable with that, my whole approach of what was available to me to chase elk, the entire landscape became available pretty much. So.
For sure. That's interesting. As you're talking through that, your background as a whitetail hunter and me having grown up as a little kid hunting elk, my top 5 would have been, we would have had one the same, but I would have had 4 completely different ones. And
really?
The one that we would have had in common was the wind. And that's, I don't know if I would put it number 1, but I think it's probably the number 1 reason why people fail is they don't pay enough attention to the wind, or they don't think about the wind, and the elk spend every minute of every day thinking about the wind. And so if we aren't spending as much time thinking about it, they have the advantage.
So does that mean you're raising your hand to come to Bozeman and we can shoot a video, Corey's 5 mistakes?
Ooh, yeah. Absolutely.
All right. Next time you're here,
Yeah,
we'll hit you up for that.
that sounds good. But yeah, it's just interesting to hear yours because of, coming from a whitetail background where you put the emphasis as a whitetail hunter, and then you became an elk hunter and realized, well, that doesn't cross over. And for me, I didn't grow up in a tree stand or hunting whitetail. I literally grew up chasing elk, and I made just as many mistakes as you did, if not more, but they're different. And so, like when you said there were 55 different mistakes you could think of, that's the truth. And I think our top 55 list would be pretty similar.
Similar,
But our
yeah.
top 5, the ones that stick out the most in our minds, are probably the ones that had the biggest impact, that shifted our perspective and shifted our failure to success.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how the audience responds. I might say, Newberg, you look drunk that day. I'm not going to watch this video.
Where can they watch those, and when are they coming out?
They'll be out on the Fresh Tracks YouTube channel sometime in April. So
Cool.
I don't know. I'm not in charge of that channel. I just show up and they tell me what to do. It's like, hey, sit down in the chair here. We got to film this. All right. What are we talking about? So,
That's
what do they
great.
say? 87% of statistics are made up on the spot. So there might be some of that applies to the videos I shoot. I don't know. But, and then we got, I'm not sure why Colorado moved their deadline forward as much as they did this year, but we got Montana due on April Fool's Day, April 1st. And then we got Colorado due the next day,
April 2nd. What's Colorado usually, the 5th?
Last year I think it was the 7th or 8th. So maybe they just.
I don't know. I haven't paid enough attention, but maybe it's the first Tuesday or whatever the day is. But
maybe. Yeah.
I like the states that keep a consistent date. I think Montana is April 1st, unless it lands on a Sunday or something, then they might have to adjust it. But Idaho's always June 5th, and they don't adjust it if it lands on a Sunday.
Yeah, Montana doesn't care if you just send your money. That's all they care about. We need your money, April 1st, or else. January 31st is always Wyoming.
Yeah.
Arizona moves theirs based on I don't know what. Utah moves theirs based on something.
I forget. And Arizona, we need to get somebody that's an expert in Arizona, because Steve Chappell was telling me one time they base their season dates and their draw deadlines off of, it's some wacky thing like 13 Tuesdays before the full moon after a red blood harvest moon. It's some crazy thing where they come up with their actual opening day season date, and then they run their application dates off of something. But yeah, they are not consistent on their season dates. They're not consistent on a lot of things there. But the one thing they're consistent on is they have big elk in Arizona.
Yeah. So anyhow, the big change in Montana really isn't much this year. The big change in Colorado is it used to be 65-35 resident to non-resident. Now it went to 75-25 for this year.
And that's just for controlled hunts, for the limited draw hunts.
Yeah, limited entry hunts. And then there's always the quirk there, and this has been in there for a long time, that if it's a unit that for the previous 3 years has taken 6 resident points or more, then the split is 80-20. And that hasn't changed.
That didn't change. And what do they call it? Are they like a premium unit or
something
hard
like
to draw
that.
unit?
Yeah, something. I'll never have enough points to worry about it, so I don't even apply in those places. But so yeah, and then they changed a bunch. This is weird. I thought that the changes they made to the over-the-counter units would have been the same for archery as they were for the second and third rifle, but they made different changes in different units. So people are going to have to pay attention to that one, because there's some people who probably think, oh, I just go back to that unit and archery hunt elk every year, up in Northwest Colorado. Well, you might show up and be holding an empty sack this year if you don't read the regulations. So,
yeah,
just what it is.
Well, and there's so many units there, like you said. A lot of them change. Some of them changed on multiple seasons. Some of them just changed on one season, and so it's impossible to go through and say, hey, here's the blanket change across Colorado. You're really going to have to go and dial into your specific unit that you want to hunt and see what changed there.
Yeah. So then we got Utah coming April 20th, I believe, is the deadline. 20th or 25th, something like that. I'll say
Utah?
the 20th. That way, if they show up on the 20th, I know they're 5 days early if it was the 25th. So
Utah for elk?
Yeah.
I thought they were earlier.
They used to be.
Really? They moved it back. I drew Utah in like 2012, I think.
Yeah.
And I just realized that the way point creep was going and everything, that my chance of drawing another good tag there was pretty slim. So I quit applying there and kind of lost track of changes. But
okay, I just looked it up. April 25th is 25th. The deadline.
Okay.
Yeah. They raised our non-resident hunting license from $72 to $120. Anyone foolish enough to be an indigent gambler in Utah, that's probably not going to discourage them. Once at a $48 increase. Yeah. But it's just what it is. Looking at Utah, I'm shooting the video sometime in the next week or so about it. Last year, 19,004 non-residents actually applied for a tag. 18,251 just bought points. And over 5,200 of those people have double-digit points.
Yeah.
So in a state that only gives away, depending on the year, let's say an average of 300 tags, there's 17 years of applicants in Utah that have double-digit points. So if you're just jumping in at 0 right now, well, if it fits your budget, go ahead and do it. But don't do it at the expense of other places you could go hunting.
Yep. No, and that's why I mentioned I started getting points there in 2002. So I had 10 points in 2012 when I drew. And just looking at the number of people that were in line already then, I thought, I don't remember what it wasn't 17 years, but it was 11 or 12 years. And I thought, yeah, I'll use my money somewhere else. And I got an elk in Utah, and that was a great experience, but the chance of getting another one is a lot less likely than it was. So.
Yeah. There's one tag issued for every 59 non-resident applicants. And then for every tag issued, there's 54 non-residents who are buying points.
Wow.
So they got 113 years worth of applicants in that Utah system. Or 115, something like that. You suppose we're going to live long enough? I'm not.
Yeah, we won't see all those go through in our lifetime.
No. So, oh well, it's what it is.
Yep.
Just want people to know, if you're going to apply, if you're going to gamble, if you got a gambling problem, well, Utah is a good place to get your fix.
Other than the fact that you can't gamble in Utah, other than their hunting lottery, but
yeah. Isn't that the weird part, right? They don't allow anything that they that is a lottery or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's pretty much lottery type odds if you're applying for a tag. Even for residents, the tags are hard to draw.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So Montana being April 1st.
Yeah.
Would anything change in Montana? I know that there's been some things proposed, and I know we've talked about points in the past. There's two different points. You got bonus points and preference points. Yeah. And to draw the non-resident combo license, the elk or deer license,
that's based on preference points.
Yep, and they limit you to, you can't hold more than 2 preference points now, right?
3. Yep, 3.
Okay.
Yep.
So if you get to 3 and you haven't spent them, you go back to 0?
If you don't apply, you go back to 0.
If you're just trying to save points. So
yeah, I can't remember if you didn't apply for that year or if you didn't apply for a couple of years. I don't know when
it's got to be that year, because I had 8 points. I had 8 preference points when they implemented the change, and I went to 0 because I couldn't hunt Montana that year and had to just buy a point. So I'm back to 2 points now, and I'm going to have to decide in the next year if I want to apply for Montana and draw a tag, and if I don't, then I'll go back to 0 again. But was it last year that if you had 0 points, you actually had a better chance of drawing than if you had 1 point?
Yeah, that's how it is in Montana. The last few years, 0 point holders in the preference point system that we have end up with a better draw odds than those with 1 point. I know some people listening are like, Randy, that can't be. Well, here's why it is. Trust me, I'm pretty good at math, even when I'm having a sinus headache. We give 17,000 non-resident elk tags by law. So our Game and Fish Agency has no say in that. If we only had 5 elk left in Montana, we will still sell non-resident 17,000 tags for those 5 elk.
Because you're mandated. You have to.
Mandated by law. Got to do that. So they take 75% of that, which is what, 12,750 or something like that. And they start at the 3-point level and fill all those applicants, and then they get down to the 2-point level. Usually they run out somewhere in that 2-point level. So then they take the other 25% of the tags, the remaining, I don't know what that'd be, 4,250 or something, and they start at the 0-point level and work their way up. Well, usually they get about halfway through the 0-point level, and they're out. They're done. So that leaves like this sandwich of the folks with 1 point who don't draw.
So they're preference points, not bonus points. So preference means you give preference to the people with the most points.
But in Montana, we want to hedge our bet, so we say we're going to give preference to the people with 0 points over 1 point.
Hopefully listeners are understanding. This all started just by implementing a point system. And then pretty soon they're like, well, we're kind of hosing people who are, getting into this because it takes all these people with 10 points are guaranteed the tag, but we're never, we're getting so many points here. So now we've got to split it. Let's take some of the tags and give them to the people with the least points. And I mean, looking at it, we'd be better off without a point system and everybody just apply and take your chances. But now we've got so many little caveats to so many different systems that it's just trying to keep on top of all of this is insane.
Yeah, it looks like the tax code anymore. But
these state agencies make the IRS look like they're sane.
Yeah, so the Montana state legislature, in all of its wisdom, this is what happens when you have new people who don't know how to write legislation. That bill was pitched as though 25% was supposed to be the folks who didn't draw. So if you're at 0 or 1 point and didn't draw, that's where the 25% was supposed to start, instead of starting at 0. But in the infinite wisdom of whoever actually drafted the bill and then the associated regulations the department has to implement the legislation, that's how it ended up. In the first year, I'm like, wait a second, this is not how this was pitched. Like, well, that's how we're doing it. Take a number and stand in line, Newberg. I'm like, look, I'm not a non-resident. I'm not going to die on this hill here. But anyhow, so then, as if things couldn't be complicated enough in Montana, if you draw your general tag, so the first hurdle is you got to draw this general tag that 17,000 of you end up drawing. You can check the box that says, put me in for a limited entry hunt, which, non-residents get 10% of the limited entry tags.
So stepping back just a bit, if they draw this general license,
general tag,
if they draw that gives them access to a whole bunch of units that are really over-the-counter units for a resident.
Well, no, they're actually limited entry for resident and non-resident.
Well, I mean the general.
Oh, yeah. When they draw that general tag, most of the state of Montana is going to be wide open for you.
But there are some units that are managed for a little bit better quality or whatever it is, that then if and only if you draw this general license, then you can try to get one of these more premium tags in a second draw.
Yep. So
that uses bonus points, completely separate from your preference points that it takes to draw that first general tag.
Yeah. Confused yet? If not, you're following along really well. But yeah, so you clear the first hurdle, you draw your general tag. 17,000 of you draw that general tag. And a bunch of you say, you know what? I'm not even interested in this stupid limited entry stuff. You guys make it too confusing. But a lot of people are. The majority of people who draw the Montana tag also jump into the limited entry tags. The majority of the non-residents. So when you, this is all happening on the same day. So the flow chart you got to walk through on your application looks like you're applying for a job at NASA or something. I mean, what ifs, but for, and how comes.
You kind of glazed over something there, but it's important to understand all of this happens at the same time. So when you apply, if you want to draw this really cool unit that is, limited, and they only give 20 tags and only a couple of non-residents ever get hunted each year, you first have to apply for that general license on the same application. Then part 2 is, if you draw that general license, that you won't find out for a couple months, but if you draw it, then we're going to look and see if you applied for a limited license, and then we'll put you into that as well. It all happens at the same time. 2 completely different systems. So it's almost like trying to find your prerequisite list for medical school and making sure you get the right classes in the right order.
Yeah. And then it's like, we don't want to stop there. Let's even add more. And so then if you're a non-resident, you cleared your first hurdle, you got your general license, you then apply in a limited entry draw, you get to check the box that says, if I don't draw my limited entry tag, refund my general tag and give me an 80% return or 80% refund on my general tag.
Yeah.
So people are like, a lot of people do that. So there's a couple thousand of them that get returned right then and there. Well, then they go
80% of the price. So you're paying 20% of the $980 or whatever it is. If you don't want a general tag and you want a limited entry only, it's going to cost you $180 every year minimum to apply and not get drawn.
Yeah, by the time you add in your conservation license and everything, that's a $200 raffle ticket you just bought there.
Yep.
So then,
but wait,
we're not done yet. Yeah, there's more. I sound like Billy Mays. Call today and we'll add something else in your order. Well, what happens to those tags that get returned? So this is all going on the day of the draw. So now there's, say, 2,000 or 3,000 of these tags where non-residents had elected a refund because they didn't draw the limited entry tag. So what happens to those 2,000 or 3,000 tags, given Montana has a statutory requirement that we have to sell those tags? Well, now everybody in the 1 point sandwich who didn't draw, and anybody in maybe the unlucky few in the 2 point level that didn't draw the general tag, and the unlucky people at 0 points who didn't draw the general tag, they all then go into another draw called the reissue draw. So all these tags that got returned by non-residents because they didn't draw their limited entry tag get reissued.
And what's the criteria of reissuing? Is it by preference?
No, they randomize the list then for the reissue.
So they make you buy a preference point to try to get a license. If you got it, you've got to use your bonus points to try to get the limited entry tag. If you don't want that tag, or if you don't draw that tag and you don't want your general, they go back in and it comes all the way full circle back around, and everybody's completely randomized with no preference or bonus points.
Yep. And so here's what your draw results will say. If you're one of the lucky ones who get one of those reissue tags, you're going to pull up your draw result and it's going to say big game combo or elk combo, unsuccessful. And you're going to be like, dang it, I didn't draw. And then down below that, it's going to say elk combo reissue successful. You're going to be like, what the heck does that mean? Well, what it means is you were one of the lucky ones who drew a tag that had been returned
in the third round.
So,
No.
I mean, you think about how hard it would take me 3 or 4 years of study to come up with a plan or a scheme to equal the complication of what Montana came up with just by letting our legislature put their fingers in the pie.
Yeah. I don't know if you could come up with something more complicated.
I don't. It is so stupid. I go there, I tell some of the folks on the legislative committees every year, you know what? Why don't we draw the limited entry tags first? And the 10%, if it's up to 10%, let's say non-residents did get their 10% of those. Just give every one of those people a general license. And then we know how many general licenses we have left to give to the rest of the non-residents. Hello?
It at least cuts out the third step.
Yeah.
I mean, then you narrow it from 3 to 2. That seems like a no-brainer. It doesn't really change any odds. It doesn't change anything other than it simplifies it for the people not only applying, but for the people who are actually doing the work and drawing the tags.
Yeah. And the normal answer you get when you bring that up, first they glaze over because they're sitting on the House Fish, Wildlife, and Parks Committee. They don't even know how our draw system works. So you confuse them right away. Or if they do have a slight understanding, they say something to the effect of, that's a non-resident issue. I get voted in the office by residents. All right.
Or
Sorry.
They say, well, that would be more paperwork and we'd have to change some legislation and that would just take too much time to do. So
yeah. Someone will say, I got a brother who's been applying since 1964 and we haven't changed the system and I'm not about to change it now.
Or when they are finally convinced to change it, they won't change it from 3 steps to 2. They'll add a 4th.
No, add a 4th. Step. Oh yeah, that's the worry. Anytime you ask them to open up the basket, you don't know what you're going to get. You're probably going to get something worse than the status quo.
Yeah.
So
and that's it's important that people understand fish and game agencies get a bad rap. Like they're the ones that everybody blames for everything. The legislature, they blame them, the hunters blame them, the general public blames them. But they're just kind of the ones sitting there in the middle. They're the ones that have to facilitate the crazy rules that the legislator and the legislature makes up to give them. And then they've got to try to make the public happy because everything's so confusing. They're the poor agency that's usually stuck in the middle with a limited budget that's set by the legislature and the increased ceiling high demand from the hunters. And their hands are tied. And so keep in mind that typically if there's a frustration there, it's usually not the state agency's fault. Sure, they're not perfect, but most states run the rulemaking through the legislative branch and not through the agency or the commission.
Yeah. No, the Montana legislature has pretty much made sure that our department is neutered. I don't know if I can say that without getting in trouble, but, they just, how it is. And the legislature, they show up. And I'm not kidding you when I go there and testify or testify online, or I call some of them personally, the number of them that do not understand the basics of how our draw system works or how we manage or come up with quotas, how that process works, they don't know. It's like, and you are one of the trustees of the public trust to manage wildlife in Montana.
Yep.
You want me to open up Montana's statute on on trustee duties? One is be qualified. One is be informed. One is when you do not have the qualifications, hire experts and follow their advice. So we hire these experts biologists, scientists, people that work for our agencies. And in Montana, this is by statute. The department cannot show up and take a position on one side or the other of legislation. They can only be an informational witness. So, yeah, we hired these people who know what they're talking about, but man, they might get in the way of my opinion. So I'm not going to ask them to come up here and present anything.
Nope.
Yeah. If it wasn't, it's not funny, but it's so bass backwards. It makes you laugh at how did we get to this point? But
yeah. Well, and
so,
it's, we look at, I just saw a couple weeks ago, somebody had made a comment about, I don't remember if it was Idaho or Montana, but, it's the state fish and game's fault that we even have wolves to begin with.
yeah, right.
And it's like,
yeah,
we're still like that. How long ago was that? That was 30 years ago.
1995. Yeah,
Yeah.
29 years ago.
29 years ago, that states were forced to accept the introduction of wolves.
Yeah.
Not that states went out and said, hey, we want to bring wolves back. That would be a great thing. They weren't given a budget to manage them when they were turned loose. It was like, well, we're going to bring them back and we're going to let you figure out how to manage them because, and that was not the state fish and game agency's doing. That wasn't their fault. That was, it was pushed on them, but they're the ones that are there. So they're the ones that get the bad rap and get the blame for it.
Yeah, that came from a guy from Arkansas. Slick Willie was his name. And, Bill Clinton, he told Bruce Babbitt, his director of the Department of Interior, his secretary, hey, get some wolves there. I don't care how, just do it.
Yeah.
And
let's don't bring them to Arkansas. Let's don't bring them anywhere else. Let's put them in Idaho and Montana.
So while his vice president, Al Gore, was inventing the internet, Slick Willie and crew, Bruce Babbitt, were trapping wolves up in Alberta and bringing them down here to Montana.
Yep.
And
you look at, how are you gonna say no as a state fish and game agency? What power do they have to say no to a federal mandate like that?
Yeah, especially in a national park.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
or
but on federal land.
Yeah, like some people did mention that Colorado Parks and Wildlife brought wolves, and they didn't. They actually had a position statement. They did not want to bring wolves to Colorado.
Yeah. That was the people of Colorado that brought wolves to Colorado.
Yeah, it's called a ballot initiative, ballot box biology, and that's how you got wolves in Colorado. It's not because your agency said, boy, we'd really like to have a bunch of those wolves. We don't have enough headache. Bring some of them on down here. And then if I was in Colorado, I'd be PO'd at those guys and at those agency folks in Oregon. Colorado.
Nobody else would give Colorado wolves. Like Idaho, Montana, Wyoming. Like, we are not going to do that to you guys. We are not going to be the ones that provide this disaster to your big game populations and to your hunting population. But Oregon, we'll help you out. We've got these wolves that flooded us from Idaho. They came running over the border here, and now they're all over in our state. So we'll give some to you.
Yeah, so I've done 2 big trade shows in Oregon this spring, and I've wondered, was that Oregon's way of trying to get rid of some of them because their management plan doesn't allow lethal management, or where they just want to be partners in this process? But I've told them all that we got like 300 or 400 spare grizzly bears running around Montana that we'll drop off anytime. We'll even pay the freight.
Yeah.
So far, I haven't had any takers. So I'm like, look, if states are just moving wildlife around like this to make everybody happy, Montana's got a lot of grizzly bears. So we got more than we need. Yeah. I mean, I think it's cool that we have grizzly bears, but we don't need as many as we got, I don't think. But so far, no one's given me the forwarding address of where to ship them.
Do we have sanctuary states or sanctuary cities or anything for wildlife?
Maybe
we could convince a governor to hire a jet and fly a bunch of grizzlies to one of these sanctuary places, and
Yeah, you
That'll
realize
clear us up.
we're really gonna get in trouble here.
Hey, I'm not. That's not a political statement at all. That was just a question of, hey, can we share some of these to
Yeah,
reduce the burden that it's putting on
yeah,
us?
yeah. Folks, in case you haven't realized by now, Corey and I have a lot of fun talking about any political slant, any political idea, any politician. So I don't care what side you're on, you're fair game. And if that offends some people, I'm sorry. It's just our sense of humor. So
That's right. And
actually,
we like to infuse some, because listen, at the end of the day, politics have to have their hand in wildlife, unfortunately.
yeah,
And it's hard to talk about some of these issues and everything without talking about the political side of how we get there. And then we tend to make light of politicians and politics in general. So
yeah. But you want to hear a success story about being involved in politics. Remember last episode, we talked about this House Bill 60 in
yeah,
Wyoming. It got killed in the Wyoming Senate.
and that was one where they wanted to pay people for the elk eating their grass in their yards.
Yeah, and 150% of the going rate. And by default, if the population was over the set objective, you didn't even have to prove that you had any damage. You know, it was screwed up worse than, I'm not going to say. But
Well, the funny thing is they came back and adjusted it,
Yep.
and they were only going to pay up to 100%,
Yep.
and there were some concessions they were willing to make it more appealing to the people that just thought this is outrageous.
Yeah.
And even that, fortunately, they got killed.
Well, that's where I say kudos to the Wyoming hunters.
Yep.
Because they stood up, they found who were the people in the Senate who agreed with them, and they got it killed.
Yep.
That's like, people can say, well, how can I be an advocate? Right there is an example of how you can be an advocate.
And it wasn't like it was the majority of the state that got a hold of these people. Just, it doesn't take a whole lot. A lot of times what happens is somebody that doesn't know what they're doing gets an idea placed in their ear, either from a friend, from somebody places this idea there and like, yeah, that sounds good. I'll write up something there and see if we can get that passed. And they don't know the ramifications. They don't know anything other than, well, it makes sense to my friends, so I'm going to write it up and see if we can get it through. And then you get a couple other people that stand up and say, no, that doesn't make sense. That's not a good idea. Like, oh, okay, well, yeah, let's pull it out then. So it's not like your voice is heard. It doesn't take half of the state of Wyoming calling and complaining or anything. A few people saying, hey, this is a bad idea, talking to the right person can get something like that shut down.
Yeah. Nothing scares a state legislator worse than 4 or 5 home district people who show up well informed, well spoken on a topic. Because if they get 4 or 5 people, that's more than the norm.
Yeah.
So if you and 4 of your hunting friends all get a hold of your elected representative and start giving a compelling case, guess what? They're going to listen.
Yeah.
Maybe in California it takes 40 or 50 instead of 4 or 5. But in Montana, I know if me and 3 or 4 of my buddies wrote and called and emailed each legislator in what's called the Gallatin Valley here, we'd hear from them. And so,
especially like you said, if you're informed if you just say this is a stupid idea and the people that doing this are idiots, they're going to be like, all right, this comment has no weight, has no merit. I'm not even it's going in the delete box. Thanks for contacting us, but it doesn't sway my opinion. You get some facts and some statistics and some reasoning behind it and send it to them. And they're like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. They're going to take it to the next level. Then they're going to have input and they're not going to put their name on something that doesn't make sense to them.
Yeah. So that's where people always say, well, what can I do? That's an example.
Yep.
We're putting together a video that hopefully is going to answer some of that question of people say, Randy, you always talk about building a bigger pie, putting more animals out there. How does that work? How do you do that? Well, sometimes the first thing you do is make sure that the pie doesn't get smaller.
Yeah.
What's the saying in first aid? Do no harm to the patient is the first thing you do. And so sometimes progress is by stopping bad ideas, and sometimes progress is by getting new and better ideas implemented.
Yep.
And
There's offense and defense. Sometimes you have to defend what you have, and sometimes you have to go out and work to add more.
you're talking about offense and defense. I'm sure the audience wants to know how your basketball season ended up.
Oh man, the good news is, well, basketball season didn't go exactly like we wanted. So I coach the JV team. I'm the coach for the JV team, and then I'm the assistant coach on varsity. And so both teams, JV and varsity, had incredible seasons. Both ended up 20-1. Both losses were against non-conference preseason teams that were good teams. In fact, I think the team varsity lost 2 went on to win state in their conference or their division. So anyway, we had a really good season, but we fell a little flat. Varsity fell a little short at state, short of everyone's expectations, including their own. And it's a different, you get to a state tournament and anything can happen, both good and bad. And there are teams that show up ready and teams that show up not ready. And if you're one of those teams that's not quite ready, it can go unlike you expected pretty quickly. And that's what happened. We lost our first game, and then we played a team from our conference in the second game that we beat 3 times already this season, including beating them by, I think, 20 points or something to win the conference championship. And I knew it was, I didn't know, but I had a pretty good hunch that this is a recipe for disaster, playing them a 4th time where they have nothing to lose and we have nothing to gain. And if you lose your first game, there's no chance of going any farther than the consolation bracket. And we ended up losing our second game to a team that we handled mightily 3 times in the regular season. And they beat us on the stage that matters. So it was a good learning lesson for the younger players. We took, 6 of my JV players suited up and went to state, and they got to sit on the bench and watch what happened and hopefully learn a lesson from it and be ready, more prepared next year.
Well, I don't care. It's kind of like hunting, whether it's a day where you fill a tag or the 10 days when you don't fill a tag. There's a lot to be learned. When adversity and challenge, and I don't know why in the last week I've watched all this stuff about free agency in the NFL, right? And what cracks me up about this stuff is like I don't know if quarterbacks are like the biggest prima donnas in the world, but some team will say, "Oh, we're going to bring in some competition at quarterback." And the existing quarterback throws his sucker in the dirt and gets all mad and gets on social media about blah, blah. Well, if you're afraid of competition.
Yeah, if you're not the best guy for the job, then why are you getting paid so much?
Yeah, what the hell are you even doing here if you're afraid that, they're disrespecting me? No, maybe they're sending you a signal that you probably aren't living up to par, pal.
Yeah.
But anyhow, I'm always struck by that when I hear professional athletes complain that there's going to be competition. Like somehow you're exempt from that. But I don't think that's a good example for young people. Young people just know there's going to be competition. No matter
it's going to make you better.
Yeah.
And not everybody gets a trophy. That's, and I think that's the thing, there's some looks in the locker room after the game that's like, we don't get to play on Saturday now, do we? That's, that's the only one of you gets to advance from each of these games. And it's unfortunately not us this time. And I mean, we could do a whole podcast on, the damage that's been done to society by giving everybody trophies and, not keeping score and all of these things. There are real life lessons and benefits and advantages that come from allowing people to fail and then allowing them to face that and deal with it and overcome it instead of hey, listen, there's no losers here. Everybody's a winner. Even though you didn't try, you didn't prepare, and you got pummeled by the other team, you're still a winner, and you deserve this little
Yeah.
trophy we're going to give you. And then they get out in the real world and realize the real world doesn't hand out trophies quite the same way.
At least not the real world I operate in, Corey.
Yeah, that's true.
But
the good news is basketball season's over, so now I have time to go out
What
and
have you been
chase
doing?
wolves and look for antlers
Ooh.
and all sorts of fun stuff that I have to put
And
on hold during basketball season.
Are you doing one over the other, or are you doing them both at the same time?
Well, it's a little early yet for shed hunting for elk, and and that's it's another topic. But shed seasons, we have a shed season in Idaho in the southeast part now, so
Hmm.
can't pick up antlers here where I live. There's no season, but
Yeah.
so anyway, we're March 15th today, and there's probably a couple elk that are starting to drop, but the real drop happens in April, and probably the 10th through the 30th of April is prime time there, and
Hmm.
then I'll shift. So I'll probably wait till April to get shed hunting, but I'm been out wolf hunting a couple times and excited to do some wolf
And
hunting here over the next few weeks.
you see any? Hear any?
So yeah, it's let's see, where do I start?
Uh-oh. Sounds to me like we're about ready to get a hunting story here,
Oh
folks.
man,
Just when
yeah.
they were nodding off, thinking, I can't listen to Newberg sniffle anymore, Corey's going to tell me a wolf hunting story.
Well, I'll do my best here. So it was a week ago, and it was my first chance to get out. I got honeydews done, I got work caught up, and I said I'm taking tomorrow off and going wolf hunting. So wolves. One of the hardest things about hunting wolves is finding them.
Yep.
Because they move so much. They have such a huge range, and they will move day to day to day. And you find tracks that are a day old, you're not hunting those wolves yet.
No.
You haven't found the wolves. And so it sometimes takes 5 or 6 days in a row to go out and figure out, okay, they were here yesterday. Now they're, I found some ravens over here. There's probably a dead elk here. Maybe they're over in this basin. And so to actually get on a pack of wolves and find fresh tracks and start pursuing them is no easy task.
Yeah.
Well, I got out at about, I don't know, 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, and I pulled off on the side of the road where I had a big basin on both sides of the road, and I sat there and listened, and I could hear some ravens over on one side, and I thought, oh, there might be something dead over there. And I sat there for probably 3 or 4 minutes just in the silence listening, and I thought, well, I'll howl and see if anything howls back. And I howled one set, which involves probably 6 or 7 individual howls, and coyotes down in the canyon started going off. And when coyotes, in the past, I've always thought if there's coyotes around, the wolves aren't around, because the wolves don't tolerate coyotes. But I think they've gotten to some level of acceptance, and the coyotes have learned to keep their distance, but they still kind of follow the wolf pack around. But these coyotes start howling, so I thought, oh, that's not a good sign. And then as soon as they stop howling, way up on top of the mountain, probably 2 miles away, a pack of wolf lights up. And so they howled for probably 10 minutes there up on the mountain. So it gave me a good chance to figure out where they were. They were either on the left side or the right side of this big main ridge. And so I thought, well, I'm going to hike up that big main ridge, and I'll be able to get up in there and hopefully get them howling when I get a little closer. So it was, they were a good 2 miles up there. So I hiked a mile probably and got up on a little knob on the ridge where I had a good vantage point. And I howled, and they immediately lit up straight ahead of me.
Ooh.
Seemed like on the same ridge. I got looking on the map, and they actually were across a draw on a different ridge, but they were straight up above me. And so I was able to hike up another 600 yards, and I got to about 1,000 yards and pulled up the binoculars, and here they were sitting on an open ridge up there. There were 3 of them that I could see. One really big one that was almost white. Just they were all gray, but this one was really close to white. So just hearing wolves howl and getting eyes on wolves was a success. So I set my rifle up, and I've got a rifle that'll shoot 1,000 yards.
Yeah.
And I set it up on my backpack, and I laid down on it. I put the crosshairs. The big wolf, actually, they all were on the move, and they went up and he bedded down, and all I could see was his head sticking up behind the snow. And there was probably 3 feet of snow up on the ridge where they were. So I knew if I hit a little low and shot through the snow, I'd be fine and still hit the body there.
Yeah.
But I thought, well, I'll just, I can put the crosshairs on the head. And so I laid down and got a good rest. I mean, the back of the gun was supported, the front of the gun was supported. And I sat there for an hour just watching that wolf in the crosshairs. And at the end of the day, 1,000 yards is a long way.
Yeah.
And I thought, there's no way I can call him in from here. There's no way, that I feel comfortable. Yeah, I want to get a shot at a wolf, but this is not the shot. This isn't the best shot. There's going to be a time, when I might shoot at a wolf at 1,000 yards. Just, that might be the only shot. But I thought, I'm going to see if I can get a little closer. So I've got crunchy snow to contend with. I'm on a ridge, and I started making my way up there, and it took me probably an hour and a half or so to get another 300, maybe 400 yards. I'm in 3 feet of snow, post-holing, crunchy snow. So I'm putting my foot on the top layer, and then I'm slowly pushing my foot down through the crunchy snow to make it as quiet as possible. Then I'm taking a step, and so it was just slow going. And I finally get up to the closest point where my ridge turns and it's looking straight across at the hillside they were on. And I slip out, find a good log. I get all set up. I stomp the snow down. I sit down and I start glassing, and I can't find them anywhere. I can't see exactly the same little opening I could see before where they were bedded, but I can see around there. And all of a sudden I catch a glimpse of one going through the trees up a little higher. And so I sit there another 20 minutes and no glimpse of it. And I finally thought, I'm gonna howl. And over the last 2 seasons of hunting wolves, I've learned a lot, but I've found there is one call that is so effective at bringing wolves in. And it's just like elk hunting, I mean, some days it's a challenge bugle, some days it's the cow call, but this time of year, there's a certain sound that I keep hearing the wolves make whenever they're howling. And I thought, well, I'm going to try making that sound. So I started howling, and then I started doing the submissive whimper, and they couldn't get to me fast enough.
Really?
They turned off at the top of the mountain, and I watched them go for 400 yards, running down the mountain, jumping over each other, bounding through this snow. And the big one was third in the pack coming down. So I let the first 2 come through the opening that I had ranged across the hillside there. And when the big one started getting closer, I started whistling. And it took him a bit, but I'm pretty sure he heard me whistling because he stopped and just locked in on my location. But he was sitting on his haunches facing me, so a frontal shot straight on. And I'd already ranged. I mean, I literally ranged the tree he stopped next to before. I had the gun dialed in and set there.
Yeah.
And I put the crosshair on him, and I pulled the trigger. And instantly in my mind, my brain said, you shot left. And I didn't see anything hit, I didn't see snow fly or anything, but I've learned that when your mind reports back to you where you hit, it's telling you
Pretty
you did
accurate.
something. Yeah. So I didn't hit him. He turned and ran, and I couldn't find the others. I watched him run down through the trees, and he was at full speed, and then he turned and went up the ridge and never could get back on him. And then I caught glimpses of 2 more just as they went over the ridge, but I couldn't find them. But if I would have been set up 20 yards to my right, I had a full view there of the entire hillside that was about half of it was obscured by a great big ponderosa pine that they all got behind and ran up the hill, and I couldn't get back on them. But I have now missed the last 2 wolves that I've called in. I've figured out how to call them in, but I've no excuse. It was a 600-yard shot, which is a long shot, but it's probably a pretty realistic distance on a wolf. It's tough to get much closer to him than that. I could have probably let him come in, and knowing what I know now, I probably could have got a 450-yard shot or so across the hillside if he would have got to a point before they winded me. But he sat down on his haunches, and I had a good rest. And I'd already dialed the distance, and it was a good shot, but I missed.
Well, that's hunting.
But yeah, it was hunting. But the really cool part is just you can't explain. It's exciting enough to see a wolf. I mean, it's
Yeah.
so rare to actually see a wolf, especially when you're out hunting them and you have a rifle and everything. But to hear them howl and then to call them in, to
Yeah.
get them coming into you and aggressively coming in, because you got to think, they know their pack. They know I'm not part of their pack. I'm
Yep.
an outsider. And when they hear an outsider in their territory, they aren't coming in to welcome you. They aren't coming in to initiate you.
No,
They're coming in to kill you. Like it's not
yeah.
like an elk that's coming in to fight you and establish who's tougher. The wolves are coming in to kill you. And you
Yeah.
can almost see it in their demeanor coming in. It's like, hey, there's 4 of us and only 1 of him. Let's go get this done. And
Yeah.
there's a pretty impressive amount of adrenaline that can come with seeing a pack of
Yeah.
wolves running into you. It's a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
It causes experienced hunters to do some things they otherwise wouldn't. And I'm saying that from experience because this one right here, this pelt, the audience can't see this wolf pelt that I have in my office, but this one was kind of a similar thing, but it was a lone wolf. And as someone who grew up with wolves in Minnesota, when I'd get bored sometimes, I'd go down to the river and I'd howl and I'd hear, sometimes I'd get wolves to respond across the river. And this time of year, January, February, March. And then sometimes they wouldn't. So I just said, if they're not there, that's why they didn't howl. I probably was so bad at it that they just said, we're not responding to that guy. But anyhow, little did I know later in my life, I did have a chance to hunt wolves here in Montana, and I was over hunting white-tailed does. And people who've seen this out on our YouTube channel, I didn't have a camera guy with me, so all I have is my cell phone, right? So I see this wolf on a neighboring property that I don't have permission on. And I get set up and I start howling. And like you said, this was a lone wolf. So I think it was trying to form a new pack or something. It probably had been booted out. That thing came on the run. I mean, just as fast as a wolf can run, and goes under the fence. Now it's over on the place where I have permission to hunt, and 280 yards. It's sitting there just like you said, on its haunches, like when you tell your dog to sit when you're going to give it a biscuit. I get on the gun, click. I'd forgot to put one in the chamber. So, yeah, the crew edited out that language.
The good news is you got a dry fire. I mean, and that's
yeah.
I seriously wish I would have, because I'm pretty sure I pulled the trigger instead of squeezing it. And if I would have taken the time to dry fire one shot and just got that muscle memory dialed back in, the squeeze instead of there's a wolf in my crosshairs, pull the trigger. I think it would have been a different because on the hike back out, I stopped and ranged a rock that was the exact distance, and there was a little white speck on the rock, and I shot, and you couldn't tell the difference from where my bullet hit and where that white speck was. Like it nailed the spot.
Well, yeah, I lucked out. That wolf didn't move really. And when I got one in the chamber, I was laying down right on the crest of this little flat undulation. So I don't think it could see me because it was just looking like, I know I heard a wolf around here. Well, when I actually had one in the chamber, 280 yards, I better be able to make that shot. Laying down, prone, everything perfect. And I did. But if that thing would have got away, I would not have given anybody the cell phone footage to say what happened. Oh yeah, I got so excited I forgot to put one in the chamber. That's what I mean when I confirm your statement of how exciting it can be when a wolf responds to your howling and comes running in. It makes experienced hunters.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. I actually went back out yesterday, went back to the same area, knowing that my chances of finding the wolves in that same area, I've always heard if you shoot at a wolf and don't kill it, you'll never get another shot at that wolf, which I don't know that they're that. I mean, they'll still make mistakes, but I'm pretty sure that if you shoot at a wolf on an open hillside right after howling at him, you're probably not going to go in there and howl at him again and get him to answer you. And I hiked in there yesterday, and they had sent one of them. One of them came down to the ridge that I'd been on and hiked that ridge just to see is there really danger here? What's going on? But I didn't catch back up to the pack. And like I said, they move so much that I never heard any howling yesterday. And I did a bit of howling, and you can hear into multiple canyons from there, and nothing was
So
talking.
how late does your season stay open? I think ours closes today.
Does it?
I think
Yeah,
so.
we have a pretty liberal season in Idaho. It's only closed for a month in Idaho, and there's some units, and on private land, it's open year round.
Oh, really? Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Oh, you guys in Idaho, you got a little more liberal idea about this wolf hunt than
We
we do.
just we expanded it too just a couple of years ago.
Really?
And it really opened up. I mean, there's a lot more opportunity, a lot more options. So now, public land for wolf hunting is open July 1st through June 30th, which do the math on that,
No.
but it's year round in, I would say about, and then the next one is April 1st through November 14th, and then November 15th through March 31st. So that's year round. And then it's year round there. So yeah, it's pretty much year round. Trapping definitely has different season dates. It closes March 31st in in fact, I think all of the units, and it's closed during parts of the fall too. Like, I think they're concerned March 31st is when they close it, and then you start running hounds for bears in April, and I think there's some hound seasons in the fall. So I think they try to keep trapping season closed during those times so that dogs aren't getting caught in the traps. But for the most part in the state of Idaho, it's pretty close to year-round hunting in most of the units.
Yeah, here I see it now. I was right. It is March 15th. It says general season date for rifle season dates for wolves, September 15th to March 15th. And then we have a special archery season for wolves, September 2nd through the 14th. I didn't know we had a special archery season. Not that I ever
that's cool.
Go archery hunting for wolves.
That is tough to, I mean, I know a few people that have shot wolves with a bow, but it's been incidental. Well, they're hunting for elk or something. To go out and hunt wolves, period, is, it's less than 0.5% success rate, I think, in Idaho. And that's not people who are targeting them. That's just overall how many tags have been sold and how many tags are filled. But to shoot one with a bow when you're trying to shoot one with a bow would be a tall order.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I kind of get, I don't want to say worked up about, but scratch my head about is, I should have looked while I was in there. I think Montana, your non-resident wolf tag is $30 or $50, something like that. And our resident tag, they almost pay you to take them. They're so cheap.
Yeah.
As how many people go out elk hunting in our rifle season, whether resident or non-resident, and they don't have a wolf tag in their pocket? And then they see a wolf and they're like, well, I didn't have a tag. Okay, why? Wow, it costs money. All right. I bet you it costs less than what you paid in gas
think it does.
to get to the trailhead that morning. But, oh well. What do you say?
Yeah, in fact, I was just going to look here and see. So non-resident in the state of Idaho, gray wolf tag is $31 for a non-resident.
Yeah, it's similar to that in Montana, but I guess the point being, if you come out to Montana or Idaho, and you have an elk tag, don't hesitate to grab a wolf tag. You never know.
Yep.
So
they're $11 for a resident. So yeah, I mean, if you're hunting Idaho already as a non-resident, you've paid the $170 or whatever for the license, the $400 or $700 or however much your deer or elk tag is. For another $31, get a wolf tag. So and here's the other thing: if you're hunting Idaho, they've made it so convenient that if you have a deer or elk tag as a non-resident, and you see a wolf, you can shoot the wolf and put your deer or elk tag on it.
Wow.
So they want to make sure that if people see one, they don't second guess not buying the tag and be like, well, I'd rather shoot a wolf than a deer anyway. That's pretty cool. So
I mean, even at that, I get asked a lot by people, well, aren't you guys just wiping them out? It's like, no. We in Montana normally they give you a minimum population estimate, which you talk to any biologist and buy them a beer, they're like, look, to have a 95% confidence level in that number, we have to issue a number that's maybe 2/3 or 75% of what's probably really out there. And
Yeah.
Montana, usually that number, the minimum stated population number is usually around 625 to 650. And we're shooting and trapping somewhere around 300 wolves a year. And now it's kind of stayed pretty stable, both numbers, the harvest number and the wolf number. So people who think that the liberal seasons in Montana are wiping out the wolves has never been out there trying to hunt them.
Yep.
Because I think we could go the Idaho route and make it year round, and I don't know that we'd see any change in harvest.
No, Idaho went just about as liberal as you can go with season dates, with hunting methods, with all of these things. I mean, the legislature also went through and changed it here a few years ago and made it so that we could, as a state, manage wolves down to the minimum 150, whatever it was. By state statute, we could shoot up to, so that there were at least 150 wolves left. Well, of course, everybody saw that, and they said, well, if there's 1,500 wolves in Idaho right now, and they're saying that they're going to kill all but 150 of them, they're looking at wiping out 90% of the population. It's like, no, we're putting in a protection there so that we don't go below that 150. That's the we'll never get below that.
Yeah.
But the reality is, even with all of these liberal seasons and hunting methods, we still aren't putting a dent in the population. Like, the population is not dwindling. It's not being reduced. It's, if anything, we're lucky to keep it where it's at, which is still too many. But, and when I say too many, the elk, the deer, the moose populations are suffering in most areas because of the wolves.
Yeah. Well,
are they reaching an equilibrium? Maybe overall.
Yeah.
But the problem becomes now, wolves are not going to be as apt to go and hang out near a farmhouse and on private land because there's higher chance they're going to get shot. But the elk also realize that the wolves aren't going to follow them there, so there's a higher chance that they're not going to get preyed upon by wolves. So now all the elk are going and living on the private land and not leaving, and the wolves are hunting the outskirts of that in the public land. So on public land, the elk population, the moose population, is definitely much lower than it's been historically in those same areas. So the huntable population of elk, the huntable population of moose, the huntable population of mule deer is definitely lower and has been decreased and impacted because of wolves.
Yeah. Well, I just checked, and right now in Montana we're at 286. Last year it was 258. It's hunters took 120 and trappers took 138. So you look at how important trapping is to having a decent wolf harvest.
Well, and the other thing to consider there is, of that 120 that were shot by hunters, I would be willing to bet that there were over 100 different hunters that contributed to that 120. Like, very few of those hunters shot more than one wolf. Of the trappers, there were probably only 20 or 25 trappers that contributed to the 130 being trapped, meaning that there's not near as many trappers, and those trappers, the ones that get it and know what they're doing, are so much more efficient. And there's a lot of trappers in Idaho that'll trap 8 or 10 wolves a piece, whereas hunting, nobody's ever going to have that kind of success hunting.
So in 2021 we took 273 wolves, trappers took 125, hunters took 148. 2 trappers took 8 wolves, 1 took 6, 1 took 5, 5 took 4, 4 took 3, 17 trappers took 2, and 32 trappers took 1.
No. That's good information. I don't know that Idaho breaks it down that well.
I want to know who this dude is. Wolf hunting. 1 hunter took 10 wolves. Whew. 2 hunters took 5 wolves. We need to buy ammo for that guy who took 10 wolves.
On the hunting or the trapping?
On the hunting side. I mean, I can't believe
nice.
someone took 10 wolves hunting. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That dude, he's got something figured out. I wonder if that's on the 2022 report. Let me see. That was in 2021. Whoever that is. Okay. This must be the same guy. In 2022, 1 hunter took 10 wolves, and then 1 hunter took 4, and then after that, it was all hunters who took 2 or 1. And last year, 1 trapper took 10, 1 trapper took 9, 1 trapper took 6, 3 took 5. So, but like you said, Corey, the pool of trappers to get to that, 125 to 140 is a much smaller pool of people than the number of hunters it takes to do close to the same number. Yeah. So in 2020, we took, I don't know if the audience is interested in this, why I'm rambling on, but we took 329 wolves. Trappers took 159. Hunters took 170. And the most any hunter took was 5. And then 3 hunters took 3. Oh, that's right. That year, that was the year, up until that time, we were only allowed 5 wolves. So,
gotcha.
There's somebody here in Montana who is just knocking the heck out of them. Someone needs to write a book or start a TV series or some YouTube series about how to hunt wolves. I wonder if he'd give me lessons. Odds are I probably am not as tough as he is, and I wouldn't be willing to work as hard as he or she does. So that's the real fact involved there. But so, well, have we wasted enough time today, Corey, or we still got more that we got to get off our chest here?
Man, we've talked about Montana, we've talked about Colorado, we even talked about Utah, we've talked about wolves, politics. I don't know what else we could talk about without jumping into marriage advice.
Yeah, we don't need any of that.
Probably need to stay. Your wife's gone and she's out of town right now, so.
Yeah, I need to back off the marriage advice a little bit here. She's been listening in a little too often now. Yeah. So things are about ready to get a little tense at my house. And it also didn't help that when I was gone at a trade show last week, it hasn't snowed all winter, but 2 of the 6 days I was gone, it snowed. It's like, guess who had to blow the snow when I was gone?
You're out giving marriage advice. She's at home blowing snow. Yeah. That's not a good recipe to come home to.
So when I come home and say, honey, I'm not feeling that good. I think I got a sinus infection. I get you've mistaken me for someone who cares about your problem.
Yeah, I will be leaving directly.
Yeah. Well. Well, what do you say we let them go? Let you get back to your busy work of chasing wolves. I'm going to go see if I can get some antibiotics. I don't know. They've had me on so many different antibiotics for sinus infections over my life. Probably they're immune to whatever it is. Yeah. You ever break your nose when you were a kid?
I did.
Yeah. So I was at the ear, nose, and throat guy one time for these sinus infections because I get them a lot. He's like, well, how many times did you break your nose? I'm like, I don't know. I didn't know if I ever did. He's like, well, if you didn't, you sure have a seriously deviated septum, whatever that means. He said, inside your nose, it looks like an S going up into your sinuses. I'm like, oh, what does that mean? He says, well, you're going to have a lot of sinus infections. I'm like, oh, is that curable? He's like, oh, yeah, I can get out my roto-rooter here and we'll straighten that right out. I'm like, pal. You don't, you just.
So I'm the same. I really struggle breathing normally through my nose.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm always congested and allergy season's horrible.
Yeah.
And man, It seems like it's probably about the most uncomfortable and painful surgery
That's what I've
to
heard.
go through.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, they go up there, and I guess the surgery itself is bad enough, but then they pack it and they leave these little popsicle sticks sticking out of your nose with the packing up in there, keeping it all packed up until it heals up. Then you got to go in and they have to yank those out, and that's worse than the surgery from what I've heard. But once you get through the first 2 weeks of, swallowing blood and everything daily and get that pulled out, I've heard it's life-changing to take a true free breath and feel what it feels like to get oxygen coming freely through your
nose,
nostrils and into your lungs.
Well,
so it's actually as painful and horrible as it sounded. I've actually thought about it, and I haven't pulled the trigger or done it yet, but it's definitely, man, when you can't breathe through your nose, it affects a lot of things.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you do the surgery first, and you tell me how it worked out.
Well, I was going to say, you're more experienced and advanced in age. I was thinking maybe you could go and do it, and then if it worked out for you, I might try it.
Well, don't stand around waiting for me to do it. It just sounds too painful. I've made it this long in my life, being a mouth breather, I guess they call that. But I probably wouldn't know how to operate if I could breathe properly through my nose. So.
And I'm afraid it would mess up my elk calling. So.
Yeah, I never thought about that.
Yeah, probably won't be going there.
Maybe it'll improve mine. Now you might talk me into it. Well, you have a great day, Corey.
Do you do the same?
I got to go over to Mountain Tough here and stand in front of the mirror and look at my white legs. And
there you go.
Yeah, people give me grief about my white gold toe socks that I wear when I work out.
Really?
Yeah.
It might be because you haven't pulled up to your knees. But...
No, I don't. They're like mid-calf things. Mountain Tough posted something, I guess, on Instagram yesterday. I got a bunch of notifications. I'm like, what is this all about? And I look, and everyone's making fun of my socks.
Yeah.
I'm like, look, man, I'm old school. That's why I shoot a 308 with a 165 grain nodular partition. I'm old school. If you don't like my socks, don't watch.
And they're probably lucky you didn't wear wool socks that day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
gray wool socks with the red top pulled up to just below your knees.
Well, I thought about that. And my wife was like, you got some of those gold toes, those white ones in your sock drawer there. I don't like her looking in my sock drawer because that's where I keep all my spare cash. So that's kind of off limits. But anyhow,
we don't hear about any of this in the marriage advice.
Well, no, everyone's got a sock drawer,
keep
right?
Secret stash of money.
Everyone's got that, right? You better hide it in a good spot.
That's right.
Because otherwise it'll be gone. But anyhow, I got to go over there and get exercising and see if I can clear my sinuses while I'm doing that. They're doing this 50+ thing with me, and I think they're going to kill a lot of 50-year-olds. I think they need to get their liability insurance cranked up. They're going to have to get waivers or something, because I just about tipped over yesterday. I'm like, man. I was looking over.
Well, you're working out with a sinus infection. That alone is enough to tip you over.
Well, yeah. Do you ever get like loss of equilibrium when you get a sinus infection? Like your balance is off? I do. And so I was just about falling over there yesterday. They probably thought, I don't know about this guy. Maybe he's on his last leg. They saw Sarah, the coach. She's looking over at the wall there. They have that defibrillator machine there. She's probably thinking, good thing I took lessons on how to use that thing. I might need to use it today. So,
oh, man.
But, oh, well, if I make through the 8 weeks of the course, I guess we'll consider it a success.
That's right.
And
I can't wait to see the before and after picture of you with your shirt off. That'll be the real test.
Well, there was no before picture, and there won't be an after picture. So, accountants aren't the type of people that go and take selfies and stand in front of the mirror while they're flexing. Okay, that just is not the accountant style of doing things. We're certainly not built like a railroad spike. We're maybe built like, I don't know, a water balloon or something. So, no one needs to worry about that.
Well, you go have a good workout and get the sinuses cleaned out and get feeling better.
I'm going to work on that. Thanks for being here, folks.
Yep. We'll catch you in the next one.